Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the 2024 Travelers Championship. This is an all-in-one preview, meaning that whatever you are doing for the Travelers Championship, if you're playing DFS, if you are betting, if you're playing one and done, or if you're just going to be sitting around watching it, this is a preview that will help you know what this golf course is all about, what this event is all about, and what golfers we expect to play well here this week, and how you can use that to win in any format of game that you are going to play. Because this is another signature event on the PGA Tour schedule. This is a small 70-person field. So that's going to impact how we got to look at things. And with it being a very unique test, very short golf course, very unique golf course. I personally like this golf course a lot. There's going to be a lot of factors in play as to who you're going to be want to pick in this week. So we're going to have all the picks and all of the information here for you here on this episode, no matter what you are doing. Now, while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button on YouTube as well as to the audio feed on Spotify and Apple. That way you can be with us for the rest of the PGA Tour season, as well as the rest of Live Golf season, as well as all of our college football and NFL best ball content that's going to be coming your way this summer, which is going to lead us right into the regular season for NFL, college football, and college basketball. So go ahead and subscribe if any of that interests you, in addition to our golf coverage for the rest of the 2024 season. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button. It really does help me out a ton when you guys do that. Now, before we dive into the Travelers Championship, we got to address a few things because pretty big golf tournament happened last weekend, the U.S. Open. So we're going to have a quick little U.S. Open recap here. If you're not interested in the recap, check the time codes and skip ahead. But I do want to talk a little bit about the U.S. Open because that was something. First off, hat tip to Bryson DeChambeau. Absolutely happy for Bryson to get that win. Like, of all the guys who went to Live and said that they wanted to grow the game or anything like that, Bryson is the one that is walking the walk when it comes to that, by being super cordial and super inviting with the fans at the actual tournaments, by being a great ambassador for the game of golf with his YouTube channel, and just by being a positive, smiling figure for the game of golf. He's doing his part to grow the game, and I'm really happy to see him get that win. He'd really been knocking on the door for the first two major championships of the year, and it was nice to see him break it down. And I got to say, he's going to be considered a factor for the next 5 to 10 majors, like until he slows down. Like, even though we only see him on our TV 4 times a year, like, he needs to be considered one of the top 5, maybe even top 3 picks at every major championship, just because of the game that he has brought this year. I didn't think that Pinehurst was going to be the best for him, but if you did watch the preview show, I did mention that with as intelligent of a guy he is and how he always has a game plan, he was going to come up with a successful game plan, and he sure did. And that game plan was using his best weapon, bombing it off the tee with the driver, and even if you missed the fairway, hoping to catch a lie that he could do something with. And he made a ton of clutch putts over the weekend that allowed him to really finally step away with that tournament. Second, after Bryson, was Rory McIlroy, and my heart breaks for Rory. Coming down the stretch of that tournament, I'd made my mind up that I was going to be happy for Bryson or Rory had they won. But what I wanted to see was somebody win the tournament. I didn't want to see one of them lose it. And as much as Bryson DeChambeau won it with that incredible bunker shot, Rory McIlroy lost it by missing a short putt, 2 short putts even. Like the first one he missed on 16, like, if I'm out playing with my buddies on the weekend, we're probably picking that ball up. It was that short of a putt. And just my heart breaks for him to have another Sunday where it's just a heartbreaking major championship finish. You know, you think back 2 years ago to St. Andrews, last year to LACC, like, the guy keeps having close calls, keeps coming up short. And everybody who wants to complain about Rory ducking the media after the round or about Rory withdrawing from this event here this week, just cry me a river. Like I'm not here for any of that. Like I'm not saying like that to defend Rory, but like, that man has given everything in his life to the game of professional golf, and he's even had his personal life invaded in these last 6 months, and like, he's gone through a lot. And so what if he wants to take a day off? He doesn't have any obligations to see the media after his round either. Like, there's not a right to that. So, and I think anybody watching or listening to this, we've all taken a sick day from work before, right? Like, even if sometimes, you know, you're not exactly sick physically, but you just need a day off. Like, Rory just needs a day off after that. And I've got like no real thoughts for anybody who says otherwise in that regard. Now, my big whiff last week at the U.S. Open was I thought Scottie Scheffler was going to boat race that tournament. And Scottie actually didn't play all that poorly, even though he finished very poorly. Scottie just got really unlucky with the putter, which is something that we saw out of 2022 and 2023 Scotty, right? Like we knew that performance was still in him somewhere. But I think the problem with me handicapping the tournament was at Pinehurst, the difference between a great shot and a good shot is like insane. Like Scotty hit a lot of good approach shots that rolled to, off the green, and he still had to get up and down for par. He hit a lot of great approach shots that were still 15 feet from the hole, and he still had to make a 15-foot birdie putt. Scotty is at his best when he hits elite level approach shots and has like tap in birdies. That's what he's best. Right? Or if he's able to chip in from off the green, which was not happening at Pinehurst either. So two things that really Scotty used to separate himself from the rest of the field. He couldn't really do at Pinehurst, and it was so hard to anticipate that coming in. But hey, now the next time the USGA goes back to Pinehurst, we'll know for the future, which, by the way, I am glad they're going back to Pinehurst in 5 years because Pinehurst as a course delivered. Anybody who wanted to complain about Valhalla as the host of the PGA Championship, I hope Pinehurst was what you were looking for because I loved it. It looked great on TV. I'm also a native North Carolinian, so I'm a little biased, but it looked great. It played great. There was so much carnage, like with just these ridiculous rollouts and ridiculous bounces. I was watching a lot of it because I was on vacation this past week. I was watching a lot of it with my wife and my father-in-law, and there were so many shots where we'd see it roll onto the green. And we'd be like, "Oh, that's got to go! It's got to go!" And then it like makes it to the hole, and then they're like, "Oh no, stop!" Because now it's rolling off the green, right? And to me, just the fine line between good and great was exacerbated at Pinehurst. It made for a great U.S. Open venue, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Pinehurst again at the 2029 U.S. Open. All right, so that does it for the U.S. Open recap. So now let's go ahead and dive into TPC River Highlands, host course for the Travelers Championship. All right, so TPC River Highlands is the host course for the Travelers Championship, and it is located in Cromwell, Connecticut. So basically, this is the Northeast's one host course yearly for the PGA Tour, and it's quite a good one. This is a very unique, tricky little course, right? It is a par 70. It is a little over 6,800 yards. It is one of the shortest courses in the PGA Tour year in and year out. It will actually be the shortest course that has been used this season. With what the official measurements ended up being, it typically vies for that title with the likes of Pebble Beach and Harbor Town and the host of the RBC Canadian Open. But it is going to be the shortest course so far this season. And really, this is quite a simple course to handicap, in my opinion. There are 8 par 4s on this course that are between 400 and 450 yards. That is 8 of the 12 par 4s, right? With it being a par 70. And so basically, there are a lot of holes where you can swing driver or 3-wood off the tee, and you're going to have a wedge or a short iron into the green no matter what. And once you're on that green, you better make the birdie putt because this event tends to play fairly easy, right? So basically, the skill set you're looking for this week, driver, wedge, and putter. Long iron skill is not going to be something that's used a lot at all, maybe to try to reach the green in 2 on par 5s. Mid iron's not even really used all that much either. This is a driver wedge fest, and you're going to need to roll some birdies in if you want to win it. Now, this course did have a slight renovation after the 2023 tournament. It did not add a single yard of distance. All it did was just kind of pinch in a few fairways, plant a few more trees, change up the angle on a few tee boxes, redo some of the bunkering. It should make it play slightly more difficult, but not like anything major. It's not making any of the holes longer. It's kind of discouraging driver off the tee for every single hole, but I still think some of the elite drivers in the field are guys who know that driver is their advantage. They're still going to be, swinging driver on pretty much every hole. In terms of the fairways, they are the 10th narrowest that the PGA Tour sees in a year in, year out basis. The rough is fairly penal, and it is tree lined for the most part, so you can get yourself in some tree trouble on this course. But for the most part, guys are going to be able to hit these fairways. It's not super, super difficult to hit the fairways because honestly, it's not like the distance doesn't pose a difficulty because if you swing driver and you miss the fairway, oh well, now I have to swing my pitching wedge or my 9-iron out of rough as opposed to fairway. And so that's why taking driver is still a prevailing strategy. And obviously they're going to be trying to hit the fairways, but it's not a super big miss if you do miss it. This is not like Winged Foot with the rough or Torrey Pines with the thick rough. Now, the greens themselves are the 6 smallest greens on the PGA Tour. They are a bent grass and POA mix. Basically, if you just look at bent grass putting, that's that you can get like what you need from that. The POA that's mixed in is not like a West Coast POA like you see at Riviera or Torrey Pines. It is an East Coast POA, POA trivialis, but it very much plays and rolls like bent grass. So if you have the ability to look at those 2 stats, which we're going to look at later, then you can use both of those, but just bent is really what you need to know. Now, this course is a Pete Dye design, and if you're familiar with Pete Dye designs, think Harbor Town, think Sawgrass, think Kiowa Island, I guess, but that's not really a great example. But you think of Pete Dye designs, there's a lot of dog legs, there's a lot of positioning where if you play to the treble off the tee, you're going to be in favor on your second shot. He loves small greens. He loves to make around the green play difficult. But really, this is, it kind of fills in the same with a lot of those courses that we mentioned, right? Like Sawgrass, Harbor Town, it kind of feels a lot like those courses, in my opinion. Course history tends to be pretty predictive here as well. So really a good week to look at course history and see who plays well at TPC River Highlands, because they tend to continue to play well at TPC River Highlands as their career goes on. Now, in terms of our key stats, we've done this for every course on the PGA Tour this week. I think this is a pretty simple setup. It's going to be approach plus putting for the most part, but there's other ways to kind of or other things to factor in as well. So my number 1 stat is going to be strokes gained on approach. Guys who are hitting their irons well are going to be an advantage here, because with it being small greens, you're going to want to be putting yourself on these greens as often as you possibly can. I think this is also a good week to look at total driving as opposed to necessarily driving distance or driving accuracy. Maybe even pure strokes gained off the tee would be okay. But basically, if you're putting yourself in good position with the driver, you're going to be in really good shape here at this golf course. Putting off of bent grass, I think, is going to be supremely important. You're going to have to roll in birdie putts to win this week, guys. Keegan Bradley set the course record at -23 for the tournament last year. So you're going to need to roll in some putts. I would expect that winning score to be around -20 to 22-ish, given that I think the remodeling is going to make it slightly more difficult. When it comes to proximities, I would look at all of them that are less than 175, and honestly, if you want to get even more frisky, look at ones that are less than 150, because this is going to be a wedge fest for the most part. And I would also look heavily at comp course performance. We already mentioned 2 of them, Harbor Town and TPC Sawgrass. TPC Deer Run is another bent grass TPC Birdie Fest course that is quite similar to this one in terms of it's not super long, it's not super difficult. The Copperhead course, host of the Valspar Championship, you actually see a lot of crossover success between those 2 courses. Jordan Spieth won at both courses. Paul Casey was excellent at both courses. Just kind of like an oddity there. Bubba Watson's also won here 3 times, and that one's like the weirdest of all to me, the fact that he won this course 3 times, but I guess Bubba was a great wedge player back in his day. And then Sedgefield is also a comp course that I would use. Sedgefield, home of the Wyndham Championship, very tight off the tee, not super difficult, not super long, par 70. That's another course that I think you can comp it to as well. All right, so with all that information, let's go ahead and take a dive down the rabbit hole. All right, if you've been with us for the entirety of this PGA Tour season, you know that when I say go down the rabbit hole, I'm not referring to an actual rabbit hole. I'm referring to the tool by BetSpertsGolf.com known as the rabbit hole. And this is a tool that has helped me out a ton in terms of making custom models, looking at stats. There's all kinds of filters and conditions that you can use to kind of identify certain skill sets or certain aspects of a guy's golf game that can help make them a good fit for a course. And it's helped open my eyes to some guys that I would have never gotten to unless I had this deep of a statistical dive here on the rabbit hole. So let's go ahead and take a look at our custom model that we went ahead and made. So I did want to look at, first off, just in the calendar year 2024, who are the best off the tee players in the field? Because I do think that there is a little bit to be gained, strokes gained off the tee this week. And the top 10 in that category is Scheffler, Oberg, Morikawa, An, Siwoo Kim, Victor Hovland, Xander Schauffele, Steven Yeager, Cameron Young, and Corey Connors. If you switch it over to total driving, the list is much different, actually. Jordan Spieth, shockingly, Oberg, Schauffele, Burns, and Hovland as the top 5. M, Bradley, Thigala, Bhatia, and Matsuyama rounding out the top 10. Now, in terms of the approach play for the calendar year, that I wanted to look at. The top 5 is Scheffler, Connors, Schauffele, Hoge, and Finau. You reduce that to the last 16 rounds, and it's Scheffler, Finau, Schauffele, Connors, and Hovland. Not that much of a different list, right? Straka, Morikawa, Hodges, Hoge, and Tom Kim round out the top 10 there. Now, I did want to look at strokes gained approach on small greens. I think that is a stat that matters quite a bit with these greens being small. The top 10 in that category is Scheffler, Finau, Schauffele, Harman, Thomas, Connors, Matsuyama, Bradley, Hovland, and Bhatia. Then I wanted to look at just every approach bucket. I'm not a big fan of using the proximity buckets, but I wanted to look at every approach bucket that is under 150 yards to kind of get a grasp of who is going to be at their best when there are short approaches into greens this week. Top 5 from 50 to 75 is Matsuyama, McIntyre, Bezadenhout, English, Bradley, and Siwoo Kim. 75 to 100. Dunlap, Scheffler, Keegan Bradley, Davis Riley, Russell Henley. 100 to 125, Matsuyama, Scheffler, Hoge, Glover, and Knapp. And then 125 to 150, Glover, Henley, Scheffler, Kirk, and Tom Kim. Every name that I just said, those guys are going to be getting a little bit of a bump this week because of all the short approaches that you're going to see. Now, I did factor in putting into my model. What I did was I looked at everybody's baseline for putting and then kind of saw how it changed when you made it bent grass, when you made it bent/polo grass, and then when you made it bent polo grass. So when I looked overall at the bent and bent polo people, McCarthy, Schauffele, Bradley, Fitzpatrick, Horschel, Rose, Fleetwood, Hovland, Theegala, McIntyre are the top 10. Perez, Hughes, Poston, Oberg, who is a great bent grass putter, and Riley rounding out the top 15. In terms of those guys who get the biggest bump on bent POA, Bradley, Rose, Hovland, McIntyre, Perez, and Riley also a huge bump when it was bent and bent POA. Thomas Dietrich ranks pretty well in all categories. Austin Eckroat gets a little bit of a bump. Sepp Straka gets a little bit of a bump. Bezadenhout gets a little bit of a downgrade, as does Ben Griffin. Let's see if I can. Sam Burns is also a bit of a downgrade. And I think that's about it. Chris Gotterup is a bit of a downgrade. Tom Hoge is a bit of a downgrade on this surface. All right, then I wanted to look at also just who succeeds at this type of golf course well, right? So I want to look at just short golf courses since the start of the calendar year 2023. Who are the best players in the field? Scheffler, Oberg, Schauffele, Eric Cole, and Justin Thomas. Wyndham Clark, Denny McCarthy, Russell Henley, Brian Harman, Chris Kirk rounding out the top 10. If you make it Pete Dye golf courses, Victor Perez does not have a sample size, but one is Scotty Scheffler, followed by Schauffele, Harman, Matsuyama, and M as the top 5. Bezadenhout, Clark, Thomas, Cantlay, Fitzpatrick rounding out the top 10. And then when you look at just TPC River Highlands, ignoring the people who have never played here, the top 5 in the last 5 years, Schauffele, Harman, Cantlay, Bradley, and Scheffler. I also want to look at my list of comp courses and see what we could find. In the top 10 were Henley, Thomas, Scheffler, M, Fitzpatrick, Connors, Harman, Hovland, Poston, and Kim. Now, when we put all that into a model, this is just my first run of the model. I'm going to be doing more versions later on as the week goes by. But in the first run, first place is Xander Schauffele, not Scotty Scheffler. And the reason why is because when you factor in the U.S. Open performance, his finish being a lot better, he passed Scheffler in a lot of metrics for recent form. And then he's a significantly better long-term putter than Scheffler. He is great at this course. He is great at short courses. So it makes sense that Xander Schauffele pops up as number 1. Scotty Scheffler is number 2, so it's not like he's a long way from the top. Ludwig Oberg is number 3. I love Ludwig this week. More on him in a second. Connors 4, Henley 5, Morikawa, Hovland, Harman, Theegala, and Matsuyama rounding out the top 10. In terms of like some DFS value plays, the first 7K player that pops up is Sungjae M and then Sepp Straka. And then if you sort by salary, the guy that really kind of underachieves for his salary is Patrick Cantlay, but that's mainly because of recent form. He doesn't have any great recent form to speak of aside from the U.S. Open, but he does have a great history at this golf course. So yeah, that was just my first run of the model. Going to be doing that more as the week goes on. If you want access to my final top 10 from the model, as well as a full write-up and DFS score for both DraftKings and FanDuel, go subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. You get the full custom model, as well as the DFS scores every single week on the PGA Tour, as well as all of our tools for drafting NFL best ball, and there's some on there, as well as all of our weekly cores that we're going to have for college football when it comes back, college basketball when it comes back, NFL when it comes back, and as well as live golf every week. We do a DFS course. So go join the Patreon if you want access to all that content. All right, that does it for all the data. So now that we know all the data, let's go and take a look at the field and see who we like here this week at this golf course. So to me, this week's going to be a really interesting week for DFS. Just with Rory McIlroy withdrawing from this event, there's really just not a whole lot of guys that are available at the high price tags. Like with so few options, ownership is really going to condense at the top of the board around Scheffler, Schauffele, and Oberg. And I think there's going to be a real decision to be made if you want to play two of those three guys together, because there's no 5K range this week to save salary, but there are plenty of options in the 6K range this week. And with there being a lot of let me rephrase, with it being a short golf course, not a whole lot of guys are going to be boxed out from playing well this week. And you're going to see some absolute randoms near the top of this leaderboard. This is not a golf course where like the longest hitters in the world, the greatest long iron players in the world are going to be able to separate themselves. So there's going to be some guys in that 6K and 7K range that run hot with the putter, run hot with their wedges, and are going to be able to be near the top of that leaderboard. And so I think this is not a bad week to take a chance on one or two of these guys near the top of the board, in my opinion. Now, in terms of betting, last week at the U.S. Open was like one of my worst weeks ever because, I mentioned here on the show that I do a lot of top 10, top 20 parlays, and I've gotten pretty good at hitting them. I was so overconfident in Scottie Scheffler that he was tied into like all of them. And so the week was just awful, like just a bad week. I feel like, doing this, I got to be transparent when I have a good week, transparent when I have a bad week also. The U.S. Open was a bad week betting. DFS was not terrible because I did have enough smartly made lineups, in my opinion. Like I had a Rory lineup that did really well. I had a Bryson and Rory lineup that did really well. But it was still just not a great week. I really wanted to get contrarian last week in the 6K range. I think I mentioned that on the show that there's going to be a lot of 6K chalk. And unfortunately, all the 6K chalky guys ended up making the cut. And even though they didn't do a whole lot over the weekend, I'm talking about Straka, Bezuidenhout. I feel like there's another one I'm forgetting. Russell Henley. But they're guys that they just made the cut. And so there were a ton of 6s last week. And by being different in the 6K range, it helped me in some lineups. It hurt me in others. I didn't have any Matthew Pavone. But like just not a great week overall. The one thing I did hit was I did hit an each way on Tony Finau. I told my wife Wednesday, I'm like, I just have a gut feeling that Tony Finau is going to be there on Sunday in this thing. And I was right about that. And so I did hit the each way on Finau. But other than that, it was not a great week. And so looking to regroup this week, looking to see what we can do. As you mentioned in DFS, Stars and Scrubs has been the strategy for elevated events, and I think that might be the prevailing strategy again this week. In terms of betting, I think I'm going to go back to the well with some of these top 10 and top 20 parlays, and I do think that this is a pretty good course to include Scottie Scheffler in that because, to me, the U.S. Open is the outlier as opposed to, the norm. Now, is this a course that I think is a perfect setup for Scheffler? No, because he excels in hitting more greens than others, and this is a course where a lot of people are going to be putting themselves in the fairway with not a whole lot of distance to go. And so a lot of people are going to be hitting greens. But his advantage is he's going to be closer to the hole than them on pretty much every hole. And so I do think that this is a course he can show up well at. The last two Pete Dye courses that he played at, the RBC Heritage, Harbortown, and TPC Sawgrass Players Championship, he won. So I have no problem with him playing well at a short golf course or a Pete Dye golf course. I think this is a good Scheffler bounce back week, but I really do think with McIlroy withdrawing, I think there's going to be a ton of ownership stroked up in Scheffler, Schauffele, and Oberg. So if you're going to play one of the three of them, which you probably want to, you're going to want to get different with your lineup elsewhere. Xander Schauffele is one of the best TPC River Highlands players on the board. He won this event in 2022, finished in 19th last year when it was an elevated event, I should say. And he's just been running really good. And last week at the U.S. Open, he really didn't have a great week off the tee, didn't really have a great week with the putter, and still finished in 7th place. Like, he has one of the most steady floors out of anybody on the PGA Tour, including Scottie Scheffler. And so I think that the two of them are just really easy, comfortable clicks this week, in my opinion. The guy that I like the most out of all of them, though, is Ludwig Oberg. And the reason why is he is just an elite total driver of the golf ball. And he's also an elite wedge player. He's also an elite putter on bent grass. And so to me, this course checks a lot of boxes for Ludwig, right? If you were to design a course for Ludwig, thinking about his strengths and his weaknesses, you would want a course where you can pull driver on most holes, where you're going to have a wedge in on most holes, and you're going to hit the green on most holes and not have to use your short game. Well, guess what? That's TPC River Highlands. If you're questioning his bona fides on bent grass, T5 at Memorial, 2nd at the Masters. If you're questioning his bona fides on short golf courses, 10th at Heritage, 8th at the Players, 2nd at Pebble Beach. Like, I think this is a great spot for Ludwig Oberg to pick up his big breakthrough win on the PGA Tour. Yes, I know he won at the RSM Classic, but that was against not a great field, and this is a great field. So I do think that this could be a great spot, great nominee for Ludwig Oberg to get his win. If you asked me to pick one player to win this event, he would be my pick to win. Now, Colin Morikawa is an interesting case because he's been playing probably the best golf lately of anybody not named Scheffler or Schauffele, but his history at this event is a cause for concern, in my opinion. He has not been good at all at TPC River Highlands, which is weird because you would think that it would be a course that would fit his game really well. He's played it 3 times. His best finish is 36th, and he missed the cut in his other 2 appearances. So I think I might be putting the fade on Morikawa this week and paying up to get Scheffler, Schauffele, and Oberg. What I do think is going to happen also is that Patrick Cantlay, with his great history at this event, he is going to be a guy that the ownership soaks up greatly. So Cantlay is a perfect example last week of a guy that had no statistical backing for you to play at the U.S. Open, but he just ended up showing up. You know the game's there with Patrick Cantlay. He ended up showing up, played really well, came in 3rd place. His price tag takes a rise because of it. His ownership this week is going to take a rise because of it. But if you had a low-owned Cantlay last week, you had to be thankful for it, which is a good side tangent right now. Basically, when you play DFS, you got to find a way to be different somewhere, right? And so Cantlay was a way that you could really be different last week, and you could have played all those chalky 6 and 7K guys you wanted. And if you had Patrick Cantlay in your lineup, you were going to be different because he was like 3% owned. There's going to be somebody like Cantlay last week that shows up this week in terrible form, not playing well, not going to be owned in DFS, and shows up and finishes top 5, top 10. The trick is finding out who that guy is going to be. Obviously, it can't be Cantlay this week because of how he played last week. One nominee for that is going to be Viktor Hovland. Viktor Hovland is a verifiably good wedge player on the PGA Tour. He has been pretty good this last month or 2. I really was encouraged to see the 68 on Friday at Pinehurst. Really just round 1 got away from him. His short game cost him greatly, but he was great on Friday shooting that 68, doing his best to try to make the cut. I'm not super concerned about that miscut, and I'm hoping that the ownership takes a detour because of it. But I think this is a great course for Viktor Hovland. He's going to be like Ludwig. He's going to be able to swing driver. He's going to have wedges in his hand, and that short game that we're all so concerned about is not going to show up all the time because he's going to be hitting the greens. So I really do like Viktor Hovland this week. Matsuyama and Fleetwood, I think, are going to be pretty chalky, and I don't think I really want a part of either of them. Both of them are great long iron players, and they separate with their long iron and with their around the green game, and I don't think that this is a course that really suits well for doing either of that. And so I'm going to be out on those 2 for that reason. Sam Burns, I don't know why he's priced up as much as he is on DraftKings. The 9th place finish at the U.S. Open was really impressive. This is a guy that generally does not play well in major championships, and he really showed up at the U.S. Open. But when you look at what he did at the U.S. Open, it was a lot of putting, and it was on Bermuda, which is his favorite surface. He's not as good on bent and bent POA like we talked about earlier. So Sam Burns is probably going to be a guy that I'm going to have just a little bit of because I do think he possesses a ton of upside, but not a guy that I'm going to be playing a lot in my lineups. I do really like this upper 8K range. I do. If you were to Asked the question, who finished last week at the U.S. Open first in strokes gained on approach? It's not Bryson, wasn't Rory, wasn't Cantlay, wasn't Scotty. It's Tony Finau. Tony Finau's approach play is like almost on par with Scheffler's in the last month or two. And if you were to ask me right now to pick a guy who's going to win a tournament before the summer ends, that's not named Scheffler, Schauffele, McIlroy, Oberg, it would be Tony Finau. That approach play is trending in the right direction. He's figured it out with the putter. And I just think that he's trending in all the right ways. Finau is going to be a guy that I'm going to ride or die with pretty much like every week, if I'm being honest. Also, if you were asking me for a second nominee for a guy that's going to win before the summer's over, Tom Kim. Another guy whose approach play is trending. He looks to be, just from the eye test watching him on TV, he looks back to be like that young, swaggering kid that he was when he first came on the PGA Tour, as opposed to kind of the nervous, like new professional that we've seen over like the last year. And I really like what I've seen out of him the last month. I think he's another guy who's going to find the winner's circle before the summer is over. Now, sticking with talking about Finau, this upper 8K range is fascinating to me. So Russell Henley is one of the short course kings. He's going to be supremely owned. Keegan Bradley is the defending champion. He is going to be supremely owned. Sahith Theegala is an interesting one. Very much looked like he was on his way to a miscut at the U.S. Open with a 77. And he battled back for a 68 on Friday to make the cut at +5 and played okay over the weekend to just finish at +7, 32nd place. That's a pretty good result from a guy that was pretty much dead after Thursday at that tournament. So Sahith also owns a runner-up finish here at this tournament. For whatever reason, Sahith plays TPC courses really, really well. He also plays Pete Dye courses pretty well. So I think that's a pretty good spot to play Sahith at. His one win also at Silverado, guess what? That's another course that featured the bent POA greens. So he knows how to put on this surface. He knows how to play well at short courses, at Pete Dye golf courses. I think that this is a pretty good spot for Sahith, and I think that Bradley and Henley are going to soak up a lot of ownership, as will Connors and Harmon, because those are two more short course kings that nobody's going to play Theegala at 8,800. Nobody's going to play Finau at 8,900, and I'm going to be all over them. Also, no one's going to play Justin Thomas because he was quite awful at the U.S. Open. But need I remind you, last year, Justin Thomas played equally as bad at LACC and then came back for a 9th place finish at this very tournament 1 week later. So Justin Thomas is very much a guy that he's super duper erratic in terms of his finishes. But what we know about Justin Thomas, he is a great short iron and wedge player. And so I think that this is a pretty good spot to play him at, given that he's going to be having a short iron or a wedge in his hands more often than not. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then we're going to talk about the value plays. Now, in that first segment, I did neglect to mention that Brian Harman is officially the king of TPC River Highlands. Like when you look at a long-term sample size, his finishes at this event have been absolutely staggering over the last decade or so. Just in the last 3 instances, 2nd, 8th, and 5th. Missed the cut in 2020, but 8th and 6th before that. Like he is like the king of this course. If you're looking for a guy to play just based off of course history, Brian Harman would be your guy. All right, now digging down into the 7K range. So we mentioned how like there's guys that could just out of nowhere have the Patrick Cantlay week last week, right? Where there's no statistical backing for them, but they show up and they play well. Well, Sungjae Im, Max Homa, Wyndham Clark, Cameron Young, Jason Day, Ben On, like they all played poorly last week, right? So which one of those guys fits the course the best? I actually think it's Wyndham Clark. And the reason why is Wyndham Clark is a guy that, yes, he's won a U.S. Open at a long golf course. Yes, he won at Quail Hollow at a long golf course, right? But he's actually pretty doggone good at short golf courses because what he does is he clubs down off the tee quite a bit, ends up in the fairway, and ends up not losing a whole lot of distance to some of the shorter hitters in the field. You look at what he's done in shorter golf courses this year: 3rd at RBC Heritage, 2nd at the Players, win at Pebble Beach, right? Like this is a guy that at short golf courses, he ups his game. I know the game is kind of in shambles right now, but hey, you know what? I'm willing to take a shot on him at a guy that I know is supremely talented at a salary of only $7,700. I'm willing to take my chances on Wyndham Clark this week. Sepp Straka, though, is a guy that's got me super tempted also because of his recent approach play. It's been tremendous. Like Ludwig, His short game can be his weakness, and this is a course where you shouldn't have to use your short game a whole lot. He can also run supremely hot with a putter on bent grass greens like he did at the Memorial, like he did last year at TPC Deer Run, one of the comp courses where he won last year. So I really do like Sepp Straka this week as well. If I'm going to be targeting the upper 7, it's going to be with Straka. Clark. Now, after those guys, I think this is also a good week to just pick some guys who could run supremely hot with the putter at a course that generally de-emphasizes tee to green play and stuff that normally shows up at like major championship or difficult venues, right? So who are those guys that can run supremely hot with the putter? Well, Denny McCarthy is one of the best putters of the golf ball in the world, as is Thomas Dietrich. Robert McIntyre had a supreme putting performance at the RBC Canadian Open, which was also bent POA greens. Mackenzie Hughes can run really hot with the putter. As can Chris Kirk, Ben Griffin. Taylor Moore is another one that I would add in there. He's been playing terribly, but he can run hot with the putter. Victor Perez is the same way. So, like, if you're looking for value plays the target, I don't think that's a bad list of guys to go off of, just guys who can run supremely hot with a putter and maybe they get lucky, right? You can also look at guys who are more of the short course kings, right? Guys who play well at short golf courses like Siwoo Kim, Christian Bezadenhout, JT Poston, Harris English. Like, I don't mind going with any of those guys as well. So, like, there's really a ton of options from the value perspective this week, in my opinion, that you can talk yourself into playing. Another guy that I would put in the Kim and Finau club of I think is going to win at some point this calendar year is Akshay Bhatia. His off the tee in approach play, his ball striking has just been sublime in the last 2 tournaments. He led on off the tee at the Memorial, was great in both regards at the US Open. His short game, which wasn't bad, it just kind of didn't really like live up to what he needed at the US Open. But, bent grass is his best putting surface, not Bermuda. So maybe getting back on bent grass greens, maybe he can run a little better with the putter, and maybe Akshay could find a way to win this week if he brings the same ball striking game that he's had in the last 2 tournaments. Now, Stephen Jaeger is a guy that I don't really target at major championships, but I think he has a very sound PGA Tour regular stop golf game, right? Like, he is pretty good with the driver. He is pretty good at short approaches. He is decent around the greens. He can run hot or cold with the putter, but he can definitely go low when he has to, right? And so I think he's a guy that is a little bit intriguing as well, but not like he's not going to be like a core play or anything like that, right? Another guy that I'm supremely interested in this week is Michael Thorbjornsen. He recently graduated from college, and he's played this event before. He played it when he was still in college 2 years ago and came in 4th. Now, he did run supremely hot with the putter that week, gaining about 9 strokes with the putter. But hey, who's to say he won't do that again? And he gets 4 rounds guaranteed. This is a no-cut event. So not a bad opportunity for a guy like that to really showcase his game and be aggressive and try to, put up a good finish. So I don't mind him at all. At the bottom of the 6K range, I think there's a lot of guys whose recent approach play is like really pointing in the right direction. Seamus Power, Adam Svensson, Lee Hodges, Andrew Putnam, willing to play all 4 of those guys. And they all 4 have similar profiles. They all play well on bent grass courses. They all have their strengths and weaknesses individually, but they're all guys who are trending in the right direction on approach. I wouldn't mind going with any of the 4 of them. I think if I had to pick one today, it'd probably be Putnam. Also, Eric Cole is a guy who's been pretty much untouchable in DFS for pretty much the entire calendar year. I think ever since the Genesis, I would say he hasn't been good at all. But if he were ever to bounce back, this would be a course that he could bounce back at. This is a course that is going to put a wedge in his hand quite a lot, and that is the club that he is at his best with in terms of his approach play. And so I don't think that that's a bad spot for Eric Cole to be in. Davis Riley coming off the win at the short course Colonial at the Charles Schwab Challenge. He was a big disappointment at the Memorial, but it's a huge contrast in courses. This is another short positional golf course like when he won at Colonial. So I don't think Davis Riley is a bad look this week either. All right, so that does it for the board for DFS. And like I said, in terms of betting, I'm probably going to fire an outright or 2 If I had to pick one, I think Oberg is the play, but I think a lot of my betting this week is going to, again, be tied into the top 10, top 20 parlays, anchor it around Scotty and Xander, and go with a few more from there to try to increase those odds. Now, in terms of one and done, we did the big one and done preview video a few weeks ago where we talked about the 3 weeks in conjunction, the Memorial, the US Open, and this one, because they're all 3 big purse signature events or majors. So we did talk about this event already a little bit, but now that we're actually here, looking at the rest of the calendar, you only have the Open Championship and 2 FedEx Cup playoff events left in your one and done that are elevated purses, right? The Open Championship is a major that is a little bit tricky, is going to feature the live guys showing back up, is going to feature some DP World Tour guys showing back up. So you've got plenty of options for that event. So really just, you've got this one and 2 FedEx Cup playoff events that are like, if there's guys that you know you want to use at an elevated event, that you've got left to use them. So you need to go ahead and map that out and say, hey, if I haven't used Scheffler, Schauffele, Oberg, Hovland yet, this would be a week to consider them. It really, really would be. Hovland, I think you could wait until the FedEx Cup playoffs. And Morikawa, I think you can wait as well. I do believe Morikawa is signed up to play the Rocket Mortgage in 2 weeks. I'm not 100% confident, but I think I saw that. And then Patrick Cantlay is signed up to play the John Deere in a few weeks. So Cantlay would be a guy that I think he's a pretty good fit here this week, but he's definitely going to be the favorite heading into the John Deere Classic. And so if you have saved Patrick Cantlay and you're near the top of the leaderboard, hold off just a little bit and use him when he's the favorite to win the tournament as opposed to when he's like the 4th or 5th favorite. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, well, Mike, I have a good one and done entry so far. I've used all those guys already. Well, what I would recommend doing is you use one of the short course kings, right? So Keegan, Henley, Connors, Harmon, Tom Kim, JT. Although Tom Kim definitely is going to be playing Rocket Mortgage, definitely is going to be playing Wyndham, so maybe not this week. Same deal with Finau. I'm pretty confident Finau is going to play the 3M. I don't think he's playing the Rocket Mortgage, so you could save Finau for the 3M. Straka, I think, will be a solid play this week. Wyndham Clark, I think that if there's any place to play Wyndham Clark and you still have him left, play him as a contrarian this week, I think would be a move, like a way to go that would be a little bit different. But that's pretty much what we're looking at in terms of one and done this week. So that does it for the show. So whether or not you are playing DFS, betting, one and done, player props, whatever, hopefully we gave you guys plenty of information that you need in order to pick out some winners this week. And hopefully maybe we provide you a little bit of entertainment along the way. If you like what you saw on YouTube, please hit the like button. If you like what you're hearing on audio, please rate and review. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress that enough. It helps me more than you guys would ever know. Just please, please, please help me out. And then also, if you like what you saw, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. So that way you can be back with us for the rest of the PGA Tour and Live Golf seasons, as well as our best ball content for college football and NFL, some of which is out now. Just check the channel feed. And then some of which is going to be coming out the rest of the summer. And then once we get back into the fall, we're still going to be doing the golf thing, but we're going to be heavy college football and NFL content, and then rolling right into college basketball content when we get into the winter. So go ahead and subscribe now. Go ahead and join now so that we can be with us for all those fun times. But anyway, that is going to be it for this episode, guys. Like I said, thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you this week in whatever you're playing. Hopefully I was able to help you pick some winners. Thank you guys for watching and listening, and I will see you next time.